Hi, good morning. This is Damon Scott, Marketing Director here at PVBS, and I want to thank everyone for joining us on our introduction to Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors. Today we will be providing an overview of Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors, which is a fully integrated business management solution. Today's presentation is going to include an overview of the executive dashboard. We'll talk into a little bit about the fully integrated web time and expense system, as well as project setup, including billing setup and managing funding, and hopefully we'll have time to get into the invoicing and invoice formats, as well as managing indirect rates. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping that we're going to go through real quick. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to our PVBS YouTube account later today, which is PVBS Dynamics NAV. If you have any questions, you can post them to the question section as we're going along, and we'll try to get to those. If we cannot get to your question, we'll just contact you separately to answer that for you. Also, later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey, and we really appreciate any feedback that you could give us to make this a better learning tool for everyone. So please take a few minutes and answer some questions for us. We do really appreciate that. The agenda for today's webinar includes a brief introduction about PVBS, and then we're going to jump right into a demonstration of the product. Again, if we're able to, we'll answer questions as we go along. We will try to save a little time at the end, but if we can't get to your questions, we certainly will get to those a little bit later. So, a little bit about PVBS. We are a top-tier Microsoft Business Solutions partner, serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia. Gives us a unique access and insight into the GovCon community. Also, as an experienced leader with over 14 years of success in the government contracting market and intelligent innovator with Microsoft systems, PVBS is a direct resource to both government contractors and the Microsoft communities. Now, the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors, which we're going to go over today, is a rich, robust accounting solution, compliant with federal rules and regulations, provides complete integration and ease of use. PVBS, we are driven to develop excellence in providing the most comprehensive solutions to our customers and our partnership channels. And with that, I'm proud to turn this over to Mr. Paul Skirpsky. He is one of our founding partners here at PVBS and VP of Sales and Marketing. Paul, welcome.
All right. Well, thanks, Damon, and welcome to everybody on the line today. I just want to give you a little bit of background on Microsoft Dynamics NAV before we jump into the product. So Dynamics NAV is Microsoft's leading product for business and accounting software across all of their solutions. So they've got 4 different products, and NAV is the #1 solution with over 130,000 customers using it worldwide, with over 2 million licensed users. So Microsoft in general, their business model is they work through partners. So they don't sell direct, and what they expect partners to do is to provide 2 things. One is vertical expertise, and then oftentimes some vertical IP. And the concept here is that if you look at, these are the strategic verticals that Microsoft is focused on. PVBS focuses on the government contracting market. And what we've done is 2 things. We've built out, an organization that really has in-depth experience in government contracting. So we've got former DCAA auditors that are on our staff. We've got former controllers for government contractors, payroll managers. So each of those critical financial and operational roles, we got people that understand that element of the business, and they're the ones that are actually setting up, implementing, and training our clients on how to use the application. And then the second thing is something that we're part of, which is called CFMD, which is Certified for Microsoft Dynamics. And what that speaks to is there's things that we've done to improve the product around the GovCon marketplace, and we submit those to Microsoft. They certify them before we incorporate them into the base system. So I'm sure there's people on the phone today that haven't heard of Microsoft Dynamics NAV before. And because of that, we like to just show this slide that kind of shows you, the length of time the product has been around. So I guess this is the 30th anniversary now.
Looking at that.
I wonder if Microsoft is, I forgot about that. I wonder if Microsoft's going to have a cake for Dynamics NAV with 130,000 candles on it. It could be a fire hazard, I guess. But the product's been around since the late 80s. Microsoft bought this company called Navision Software around 2002, and prior to that, I was actually working with through a partner that was implementing Navision for a company that I worked for, and we were the largest user back in the day, back in the late 90s. We were a global smart card company, $1 billion in revenue, using it across the globe. Today, Microsoft's focus is for small mid-market businesses with Dynamics NAV, and really you can see some of the things in 2016 which were drivers of improvement, and Microsoft recently released 2017, which we're going to be showcasing here shortly. But with 2016, the big improvements were around how it works with the Microsoft stack. So for folks that use Office 365, its usability with Office 365, and when they say enhanced in experience, that means you can actually get to the client right from Office 365, including how it works natively with Power BI. And that's something that's really exciting that Microsoft is doing, which is providing a dashboard solution that's not only integrated with NAV, but also it's embedded into NAV, and I'll explain later what that means. The box that says Windows really is, for me, it's a misnomer because it's more than just a Microsoft Windows OS that these products run on now. So the desktop version is for Windows, but obviously the web client that can run on many different web browsers, including the Google browser and the Apple browser. Same thing on the tablet and the phone side. So if you have an Android device or an Apple iPhone, you can run the application downloading that app from the Google or Apple store there. And then the last thing I want to touch on this slide is e-everything, because this has started to come up more and more. And what e-everything is about is how does this product integrate with other products outside of NAV? And companies are developing standard integrations, and the two that I think are huge for our clients, one is OCR, which is optical character recognition. So for folks that have a lot of purchase orders, it's a way to automate the entry of that PO from actually just being able to scan that document. So what happens is you upload it to the OCR tool, and that's a cloud-based application that will read that PO document and actually create the PO for you. And the second one is integration with banking software. So there is a Microsoft partner product that integrates with, I think right now it's about 150 different banks, and continuing to expand there. So some exciting stuff. So we're going to get right into the demonstration. I guess before we do, I know we've got companies on the phone from all over the U.S. and also different industries. And it would be good to know, what are the things that you're looking to improve from a system perspective in 2017? Because I'm sure that's why people are here. How do we make improvements in terms of what we do?
Absolutely, Paul. And I've just put a little quick poll up there right now. What your main areas of focus for improvement are for this year, and integration with other systems, reporting information, automation of manual tasks, and compliance. Looks like, and these are all that applies. So if there's more than one, you can select more than one. And a lot of folks have obviously selected compliance. That's
we're going to give you 25 more seconds.
Yeah.
We'll give it 1 minute. It looks like right now we've got about a little over 60% of the people have voted, so we'll give it 1 more minute. But like Damon mentioned, compliance is one of the top ones. They're kind of running neck and neck. Compliance and automation of manual tasks. Reporting is about 50% of the folks, and then integration with other systems. So it looks like people have chosen several, and we're up over 85%. Let's go ahead and close it out. But it looks like really the automation of manual tasks has a very slight lead, with the compliance piece right behind, and then reporting. So I think that's good. We won't really get into the details about compliance today, but two things I'll mention about compliance. One is compliance is not just your system. Compliance is also the documentation of your policies and procedures and making sure folks follow those things. But we've got 100% success rate in compliance, and hopefully I can show you some of the things where we can help people to automate manual tasks as part of today's presentation. All right, so we're logged into Microsoft Dynamics NAV, And I want to start with like a little bit of a general overview and show you some of the things that, from an interface perspective, that Microsoft has done to improve the product. And then we'll go into time and expense and different reporting options. So there's two elements to the interface. One is what we call a role-tailored client, which means based on what role is assigned to me, I have a home page designed a certain way. So I'm assigned the role of accounting manager, and I'm seeing the different boxes related to my role. So expense reports not processed. Whoops, hold on one second. My system timed out, so I'm going to give it 1 second to restart here. So actually, Damon, while we're doing this, let's pull up another poll right now, just to kind of keep people engaged.
Sure.
And maybe the thing we could understand is, oh, you got something up
already? Yeah, I already did. I already
put
it up there while you're talking about it. Yeah, because I mean, we talked about a lot of different Microsoft products, and I think it's always good to learn firsthand what products companies are using, what they're familiar with, as we talk about all these different systems that are out there. So what Microsoft products does your company currently use? We talk about Office 365, Outlook, SharePoint, Excel, and then others. And we've got just over 50% in now, Paul, and it looks like pretty much Outlook and Excel, nearly 100%, and SharePoint coming in just over 60 with Office 365 at about 65%.
Okay.
And a lot of others as well.
Okay. Yeah, so it looks like there are a lot of folks using Office 365 today. I restarted my connection, so we're set to go. So let's go ahead and close the poll out. And, you know, I guess we talked too long there in the front, so my session timed out. But so I'm logged in the system. I mentioned this idea of the role-tailored client. So I'm logged in as an accounting manager. There's also role-based security, which is a little bit different. And what that speaks to is it's not just what I can see. It's, you know, whether I can actually just see the information. Can I modify it? Can I delete? Do I have execute permissions? So those two together define what I can see and the kind of capabilities that I can leverage. So as an accounting manager, I can see things like what invoices need to get created. So here are the 12 different jobs that have, you know, time or expenses against them or a milestone that we are available to bill. I can also drill into expense reports or timesheet corrections that need to be reviewed. In the center grid, this is showing me a little bit of a chart, and this is giving me information about balance per bank account. So there are modules, you know, it's a full enterprise system, so there's modules for everything from, you know, production to job cost to finance, banking, etc. So there's different dashboards for each element of the system, and then as a user, you can choose those ones you want to have on your home page. And then, like I mentioned, with Power BI, Microsoft has made it possible for people to build their own dashboards and be able to configure those, you know, for the organization. The bottom left-hand corner, integration with Outlook. So it's just showing my Outlook inbox, calendar, and tasks. What you'll see is each one of these little parts is configurable as an end user. So if I decided for me I don't want to show my mail, I can go ahead and hide it. And now I just see my calendar and tasks. I'm still using Outlook, but now it changed from a visibility perspective what's in front of me. On the right-hand side, I call these, this is the My section of the home page. And the idea here is these are things that are either set up by me or sent to me. So in this case, notifications would be inside the system. There's the ability to take notes on any of the master records, and you can send those notes off to people. So it's like a little instant messaging or chatting, and you can select those notes, and actually it takes you to the record where the note was placed. The job queue, this is the place where you can schedule things. So the typical thing that's scheduled is reports. So you can see that I have 3 different reports that are scheduled. These reports that are scheduled, they can be determined to be a report that's processed into a PDF file, a Word file, Excel file, actually print it and choose a printer, or just process it. And then the last step would be, if it's a recurring report, you could decide that this one report, say the AR by history, or AR history by project report, maybe that's one you run every Monday. You're responsible for collections, and I can choose this as an option, and then every Monday that report would process and show up in my inbox here. the My Jobs section, this can be any master record in the system. So I'm showing My Jobs, and just to give you an idea, in my demo system, I've got probably 50 to 75 different jobs. Well, on my home page, I have these 4 because I go into those in each demo. So the idea is it's kind of like a little tickler that gives me, here's the top ones that are important to me, and by double-clicking any of the records, it actually takes me to the setup screen. I'm going to touch on later, like Damon mentioned, the elements of how jobs are set up. But while I'm here, I do want to touch on this status box, because the status box is something that's a little bit unique. The status box shows information about this record. So for job 1002, I can quickly see information about contract value, funded value, revenue, etc. Each one of these values, behind it is the detail. So if I drill into, let's say, the AR balance, this would take me to all the open AR entries for job 1002. From the entry itself, I can do everything from go to the source document that created that particular entry. So in this case, it came from an invoice. From that invoice, I could email it back out to the customer by just clicking my email button, or maybe reprint it, in a format that is of interest to me. So it gives me that ability to not only email things, but also reprint them as needed. So we'll go ahead and pull up that invoice, and then an invoice is just a report, so that can also export to Excel, PDF, and Word. The last thing from the source document is source documents also have related documents. So the original AR entry, if I drill into that amount, the remaining amount, it would show me anything related to it. So in this case, there was an application, and that was a cash receipt that was applied to that open AR. And then from that cash receipt, I could see when we did that application of cash, what was the impact on the general ledger, the customer ledger, and then in this case, the bank ledger, which would show me the details of what bank account would he put it into, has that cash receipt cleared yet? In this case, it's open, which tells me it hasn't. So it makes it easy for people to get questions answered by giving you that drill down and navigate function. Let me go back to the home page, and from the home page, I want to touch on departments, because departments give people an idea of what is the breadth of the application. And I know from talking to Damon, he looked at some of the profiles of the companies that are on the webinar today, and I know that we've got clients on here, clients and prospects, hopefully future clients, everybody, that resell products to the government. So there's a whole product contracts module. There is manufacturing and warehousing. I know we've got some customers and prospects on here that are looking at the manufacturing side of the system. The majority of the folks on the phone today are project-based, so we're going to put more energy into the project side of it, which is if you're engineering services or project management or IT support, we're going to touch on all those aspects. Then there's also HR and payroll built into the application for folks that do those things in-house. So that gives you an idea of the breadth of the application. We're going to also go into timesheets, expense reports, and the approval of those documents, so we'll go through that as part of our project workflow. What you're going to see in the system is that every module has different reports that are available. Also, from your home page, you can set up your list of favorite reports. So in my demo system, here are the reports that oftentimes people ask about that I'll run. So everything from, we talked about aged job receivables, funding notification report. So this is a report that I could run based on a % of funding used and let me know what are all those projects that are at that threshold or higher. And then another report that might be of interest is a job revenue summary report, which would be one that if you need to provide it to your bank around your funded backlog. So this would give me the ability to summarize this either at the contract level, job level, or task level, filter it for maybe one job or multiple jobs. You look at every job in the company, the period you want to run it for. I'll just go ahead and preview it just to give you a sense of how reports work, but I could also download it. So now this is showing me details about, in this case, by contract. It's showing me the job that I filtered on, and then for each task, the breakout of current period, year-to-date, inception-to-date information, including how much of the funding has been used, how much of the funding is left, and then giving me an idea of the overall funded value remaining. So really a nice report that people from finance often use as a way to manage the top-level project financials. So in addition to reports inside the system, we talked about Power BI, which we're not going to be focused on today. We're going to focus on the project side, the job cost side of the system. But the system can leverage Power BI, and I saw that 60+% folks were using Office 365, and Power BI is one of the components. Oftentimes it's already in your license. You might not realize it, but Power BI is integrated out of the box with NAV. And like I mentioned with NAV 2017, you can take any of those Power BI views and have those available inside the system. For folks that use Excel as a way to produce reports, one of the things that we did is we built out a data cube within SQL Server, which is the back-end database, and you can leverage Excel as a way to surface information, or you can use other business intelligence front ends that leverage analysis services or cubes as a way to provide information to operations or finance. So this is showing me some of the operational views, so everything from a burn report, labor analysis, cost analysis. So behind each of these, there's details regarding how projects are performing. So in this case, I'm looking at one or multiple projects, a list of tasks, a period of time that we're running this for. So we're running this for April or June of 2010. The other thing that's different about the system is the system does not compress old data, or it doesn't put it into different files. It's all in one database. So because of that, I can look at multiple years of information. So this is showing me a trend of my top-line revenue on this job or jobs, all of my operating expenses, including indirects, net income or loss, and also what was spent. So that spent value, you can see when I look up in the formula bar, there's no data keyed in. It's just looking at this job cube at a measure called total spent, filtered by these filters that I've set, or slicers. And then over to the right is just a graphical representation of some of the information. So it's showing me my burn rate trended over time, so how much funding am I using each month. Then the system takes that average funding, divides it by funding remaining, and gives me a little projection. If we continue at that same pace, we've got 9.5 months of funding left. The cost detail is very similar to the spend report, except it's not showing the details about top line and bottom line. So it's more of a costing report. So it's showing me my direct and indirect costs for one or multiple projects that I'm selecting. And then the labor analysis is just showing me details about hours that were charged on the particular projects that I selected. And each one of these views could be tweaked, to show you additional information or to reduce the amount of information. On the financial side, giving you an overview of the business, so a trend of revenue, profit, and AR, your balance sheet with key ratios over the right, income statement, cash flow, and then a couple different indirect rate trend views. So these are showing you, in this case, a monthly view of how your rates are trending, giving you information about the pool and the base, actual rates, provisional rates, how those are trending over time, and then we've got a view that's just a current period and year-to-date view. To give you an idea of the kind of information that's in that data cube, I'm just going to go to a blank sheet, and when you connect the cube, so I just hit data connections, this is how I'm going to connect back to that analysis services cube. In this case, I'm connected to a job cube. We also have a finance cube, a product cube, and a purchasing cube. When I connect to it, there's information that's then available. So you've got job budget information. You've got job ledger information, which would be your historical job data. So information about AR or billings. So anything you wanted to report on, I can just select it and put it into my value section. So I'm going to look at billings. We're going to look at labor hours. We'll look at labor cost. And let's choose a few other ones. We'll look at, there's purchasing data, revenue data. If I want to look at unposted hours, we'll explain what that is in just a second. And we'll look at unposted spent. So these are the measures that we want to analyze. And then the rows would be how do we want to group it. So for instance, say your organization thinks about things by customer. So even though we're looking at the job cube, I could still look at it by customer. I could say, I'm not worried what project we're working on. I just want to know who's the customer that's managing that work, or who's the customer we're doing work for. And then maybe I want to know who's managing the work. So let's look at our project managers, and let's put the project manager on there. And then underneath the project manager, we're going to see, what are the projects that they're managing, or the customers where they're managing projects. Filters allows me to look at subsets of this. So if I wanted to look at maybe just certain types of projects, I could say, let's look at just certain types of projects, and maybe let's just look at T&M work. And now I'll say, okay, and now what you're seeing is, each project manager, the customers that they're managing projects for, and then underneath the project itself, or the customer itself, would be the actual project. So if I look Kevin Mims, he's doing some work for Department of State. If I expand that, you can see it's Operation Morning Light. If I flipped the customer and the project manager, now you can see that we've got several things going on for Department of State, 3 different projects. We've got 3 different PMs. So now it allows me to kind of look at things in different levels. You also can drill into the detail of these things. So Kevin's project has a total of 576 unposted hours, which means these are hours in timesheets that haven't been approved yet. I can drill into that number to get to detail. So if I wanted to look at maybe what were the labor category codes charged out of those 576, we're going to drill to that labor category, and you can see that there's a lot of them that are project management, some senior consultant hours. And if you wanted to know more details about maybe, I look at this and I say to myself, I don't think we did any training this period. So I want to drill into that training level 3 labor category, and let's actually see who are the people that are charging time. So we're going to go into resources, those are our people, and let's look at the folks that have charged time in this period under that labor category code. And now when I drill to that, I see, okay, it's James. He charged 40 hours. Oh, that's right. We had a special one-off training class. But the idea here is that it's a way that you can kind of look at things at a higher level. You're not getting down to the timesheet itself, but I can see data from the timesheet from here. So this is the third part. We look at the core financial system, time and expense entry, and then different kinds of reports. All right, so we talked about going through that day in the life of a project. And one of the things we just want to mention actually is, like Damon mentioned, if you have some questions as we go through this, there's a question panel on the right. Typically we save them until the end, the questions, but if you have something that it would help to have it answered now, as we look at them, we'll let you know if we have questions, and we'll go ahead and respond to them as they come in. All right, so now talking about project setup, let me go ahead and we'll open up a new project, and we'll talk about how that project gets set up. So in this case, on the left-hand side, this is everything related to the job setup. So this is my internal job number, a description of the work, the client we're doing the work for. So all of these fields where you see the little caret down, it means you're looking into a list. So I didn't type in all this information about the customer, their location. I chose it from a list. Same thing in terms of contacts. So I can have multiple contacts associated with a customer. So when I select that customer, what you see is I've got a list of contacts underneath of it. So today, if you struggle with trying to remember, who is the functional contact or who's the contracting officer on this project, you can store that kind of information about that job. This is our internal PM. So if you remember when we were over in that data cube, when we looked at the project manager, this is how the system knew who was the PM on the project. The overall period of performance, these are kind of the information on the general tab. When I go to the posting tab, this is more of the financial data. So on the posting tab, I see information like what is the department that owns the project. I can see information about revenue, billing rules. This is a cost plus fixed fee project, so there's a couple extra fields that are being filled in from a billing perspective. So one is something called billing pool group. So when you have cost type work, you can use your standard indirect rate structure and provisional rates in terms of indirect recovery. But we see more and more that companies have a recovery method that's different than how they allocate costs. So the best example that I've seen lately is the fact that people oftentimes either can't recover G&A at all on travel, or oftentimes there's a cap on it. So this allows me to set up a way of recovering indirects that's different than how the allocations are done. So that's how the system knows, should I apply G&A? Well, this setup is going to determine whether I'm able to apply G&A to travel from a billing point of view. The fee percent, so these are, again, they're set up by you, they're reusable. So if I have several projects where we get 5% fee on all direct expenses, you can identify that, and then the system would use that as a way to calculate what the fee is that's earned on a project. On the labor side, if your fee is not calculated based on dollars, it's calculated in hours, you can use this fee amount setup, and then this is any type of withholding. So the way to think about this is like the top line. At the task level, we'll show you how you can actually override these setups and have scenarios where maybe the main job is cost plus fixed fee, but you've got a fixed price task. So the system supports overriding these revenue and billing rules at the task level. On the contract tab, this is information about the contract itself, what's the contract the work's being performed under, and also contracting office and paying office data. So this is how in the system we knew that there was work being performed under a certain contract vehicle because somebody selected at this point. All right, so the way to think about the job is the top level is the contract. Below the contract, we've got the job. This job is a 20-character alphanumeric field, but it's not used for the segmentation. The segmentation is within things like, the fields set up to track attributes of the job. So in this case, the department, it's a separate field. You've got information within the WBS that gives me additional tracking. So the department, the resource, the task order, those are all separate fields. The WBS structure is a way to develop a cost and funding mechanism that's really unique to each project. So this WBS field is a 60-character alphanumeric field, and it's used for four main components. So number one is it's identifying the charging detail. So I can define what level I charge at that can be unique in every job. So in this case, whatever my lowest level is the level I charge at. So I'm charging for this 001, I'm charging at level 2 here. So I've got a task called labor. From a funding perspective, this can map to an Akron or CLIN. The funding and contract value can be at any level of WBS. So in this example here, it's at the charging level, but I could set it at level 1, and what would happen is everything below that could use this funding. So in my example, though, I set it at level 2, and I'm saying labor is funded at almost $12.8 million. All of my funded values are going to roll up to my total funded amount for this job, which was on that status box that we touched on earlier in the presentation. So that's where that 26 million comes from. This value is a virtual number. Anytime you see a line with a number with a line underneath it, means you can drill into it. So this takes me to all the detail here. This number also is a virtual number, so this 12.7 or almost 12.8 million of funding. If I drill into that, it's going to show me the detail of all of the funding mods, which could also be non-funding, I guess. You could have, I should say, really all the mods, funding and non-funding, because this one is, there was a change to the POP that happened on January 5th. If I had an additional mod that needed to come through, I could just come in, and I'd go down to the next line, and we'll just say mod number 57, and if I put in T, it'll put in today's date. Let's just say that it was a $200,000 mod. So I could record that mod, click OK, approve it here at the task level, and now what you see is the overall job just went to 26.3 and 26.4. If we go back to that WBS, you're going to see the same kind of, calculation that's done there. So I don't need to do the calculation. The system does it for me. That contract and funded value, like we mentioned, maps to an ACRN or CLIN. And then the next thing in terms of contract and funding is that if you have documentation of that. So we see this oftentimes where people, they might track the contract and funded value in their current system, or they track it offline. So we're saying you can track it in the system. But then the second thing is, what's the documentation around that? So the system gives you two options. One is, if you want to link documents to files, there's a link section. And then for folks that use SharePoint, I think it was like 60% of folks on this call today were using SharePoint. You can actually have, there's a standard SharePoint integration which allows you to put SharePoint part on any of the master records. And what that allows me to do is just drag and drop a document. So I could take a document from my desktop. It would, in essence, make a copy of it, put it into SharePoint, link it back to this page. So now you could have all your funding documents right here for you. You could have the contract, any of that information available to anybody that has access to SharePoint. I don't need to worry about, maybe Damon left an email in his email inbox and forgot to associate it. Once he associates it, now it's available to everybody. So it's a great way to help manage documentation and improve that collaboration. So if we go back to that work breakdown structure, that's kind of covered really those two key elements around what is the charging level, details about funding, and then the next thing is it drives everything regarding time and expense. So this is what's telling the system, this charge code called labor, this should be available for people to enter time into. And then this charge code called setup, people can enter time or expenses. So that's what controls that. It's all done inside the system. All the time and expense management pieces are done, for the most part from the screen. And then the final piece is assigning people from a membership and approval perspective. So this membership is a way that you can create a team of people and assign that team to any task. The team itself can also have its own variation. So what I mean by that is I'm going to highlight one of the lines here. And this is saying I've got a resource named John, and John is having this task available to him. So it's not just the entire job, it's one task. So John can see just task 001-01, and he can see it just for March of 2014. So what this is going to do is, as soon as that period expires, John's no longer going to see this task, so he can't charge to it. And it's also not in his list, so it doesn't become distracting for him. So it's kind of like your labor assignment, letting them know what tasks they can charge to. For anyone that didn't have a date assigned, what happens is it defaults to whatever's in the task. So if I go to that task for the subtask called labor, you can see that the pop on this is January 2014 through December 31st of 2018. So each task can have its own pop. This is what controls the time entry side of it. And then at the task level, you can also have an override of any of those revenue, billing rules, department, client override. So it allows you to model those hybrid contracts without having to do things offline or try to glue things together later on. So that's how that job is set up to really enable you to automate and map that setup to exactly how that contract was issued. The system also supports the ability to set up budgets against the job. So this budget, one, you can have an unlimited number of budgets. So in my demo example, I've got a baseline budget. Plus we had a budget we were using for our ETC calculation. So that can drive your revenue recognition on a fixed price project. We had a reforecast. So you could have multiple budgets assigned to a particular job, and these budgets allow me to budget resources. So those are our people. So I've got labor budgeted, and you can see that the labor budget is hours, but behind the hours are the detail of what that budgeted cost would be, and also the budgeted revenue based on the resource that I chose. The system has some tools to help you to automate some of those functions. So there's a copy function that allows me to copy the ratio of labor. So in my demo example, I've got Andrew that has 100 hours in January. Each resource can be assigned a calendar that tells them, what period do they work for? Do they work Tuesday through Saturday? How many hours? And then based on that ratio, that's going to drive how many hours, if we copied that month to February, because February is not a full month, how many hours that should be planned for February. So if it was full-time, and full-time in January is 168, and maybe in February is 152, it would copy 152 into February. So it has this ability to copy those labor hours. Can also do some copy on the ODC side, plan for employee rate increases, either on their anniversary date or an effective date. And then there's also the ability to import, export these budgets from Excel. So, giving people the ability to build those project budgets, maybe you don't want to show them the details of the cost rate, so you can have the screen behind it hidden for people, or they can drill in and see that kind of detail. System, we talked about the overall funding, but you can also set, I'd call these, funding limits or billing caps. So an example would be things like, the project is funded for X dollars, but maybe you have a cap on G&A. So you can cap any of your direct or indirect expense categories against any task in the system. So it's going to prevent you from billing over that particular ceiling from a setup point of view. Budgeted rates would be related to if you had an indirect rate structure that maybe was the same, but the rates themselves were different. The budgeted rates allows you to control that part of the setup. So that's a little bit about a cost type project. I know there's probably a lot of folks on the phone that are saying, you know what, I don't have any cost type work. All my work is fixed price or T&M. So let's spend just a couple minutes on T&M work to show a little bit on how T&M projects work. So I'm going to skip over the overall setup. I want to go right into the pricing side of it. So with a cost type project, how you bill is a build up, right? So I'm identifying costs, I'm applying those burdens, I'm applying fee to that. So that's how I build the price. So on a T&M project, all that work is pre-done by you when you calculate what your price is. So this price includes, a burden, a fee applied to it, and comes up with a billing rate. So the first thing, actually let me touch on one thing before I hop right into these prices. We talked earlier about having a contract vehicle. So probably the most common one you hear out there is someone has a GSA contract. So that GSA contract is going to have, oftentimes it's a 10-year plus contract, and you've got predetermined bill rates in there. So if you had a GSA contract with predetermined bill rates, you have the ability to copy in your contract pricing. So what the idea here would be is I want to take my GSA rate that I built one time in the system, and I built that in the contracts module, and I want to copy it onto this job or task. We're doing work under our GSA contract. We're going to copy that into here. And what that would do is that would build out project-specific pricing. So now I've got pricing for 2025, which was derived from the GSA rate. If you offered a discount on all labor categories, you could do that right here. I could say that we're going to give this client a 3% discount off our GSA rates. If the discount was off of one labor category code, what you could do is you could set up the discount right here. So if I look at my consultant one labor category code, I could go in and set up that discount inside the system. I could also use my export to Excel. So every list or ledger can export to Excel. So if I hit Excel, what it's going to do is it's going to take this data and it's going to pop it over to Excel for me. And you could see when it sends it over to Excel, it looks exactly like it did inside the system, including it's got these little filter boxes up top. The thing that's nice about what we can do in Excel is that example of the discount, I could actually do that really quickly in Excel. I could tell Excel that I want to provide a 3% discount to this customer just on this labor category code, and we're going to go ahead and set up the decimal place to support just 2 decimal billing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the old entries out, we're going to put the new ones in, and now we've got that 3% discount. Go ahead and paste it. That's been calculated as part of this project setup. So the other thing that you might have noticed is that this particular date here does not need to be the first date of the month. It also does not need to be the first day of your timesheet. It can be any day in the month. So in this case, what I'm seeing is I've got a labor category code called Consultant 1, and all the way through January 5th of this year, it was billing at $182.91. Well, once January 5th hit, it just escalated to $187.93. So the system would automatically do that calculation for you to make sure that you bill the proper amount. So you don't need to worry about remembering to go back on the 5th to change the bill rate. The system will automatically update it based on this setup. The second thing is, if the employee timesheet went over that period and they were still billing this Consultant 1 labor category code, the system would automatically know, actually at the point that they enter the time, what the bill rate is, because that billing is calculated in the data cube even before you process labor. So you could see from the cube what the bill amounts were and what the rates were. All right, so now the last thing on T&M is that labor category code. Let's go ahead and remove that filter. The labor category code that someone works under could be different by project. So each person is assigned a corporate labor category code, but also a project labor category code. So if I show these two screens together, what would happen is if I look at who is the Consultant 1 on this project, we'll filter that value. Here are the 5 folks that are Consultant 1, and then currently that's billing at $187.93. So this is going to default the employees' labor category code in their timesheet, and this is going to calculate the amount that they're going to bill. Employees can have multiple labor category codes even within one project. So I could say that in this case, Paul, he is a Consultant 1, but he also is a dispatcher of motor vehicles. So that allows you to reduce the burden on staff to remember their labor category code, but you can also allow them on their timesheet to override it if you had a reason to do that. All right, so that's kind of the job setup and talking about T&M and also talking through the details about cost type work. So now let's go over to the timesheets, and we're going to talk about the entering of time and expenses, and then we'll come back into the system for indirects and billing. So on the timesheet side, just a couple high-level items. We talked about the fact that it's all administered in one system. Other thing that I didn't mention is there's no synchronization. So as soon as I update a WBS code to say this is available for time, and let's just say that I assign the blue team and Damon's part of the blue team, automatically Damon can now see that charge code. He would just log in, can see it right away. As an employee, they can look up their PTO balance. And there's an unlimited number of PTO categories. You define how PTO gets calculated. We have some standard rules. And then you define what are the PTO categories. So if you have sick, PTO, holiday, vacation, I just talked to a company that has both vacation and PTO. I wasn't sure what the difference is, but it sounds like a nice concept. You can have any of your categories there. Requesting time off. So if somebody needs time off, they can come in, and let's just say I need Friday off. I could come in and say that I need Friday off, and then the description would be the reason why I need Friday off. So let me just go ahead and we'll put in a reason. So we'll say trip to Florida. It's getting a little cold here. I'm going to take a trip to Florida on Friday. And then I would just type in, what is the type of job, in this case, PTO request. So I'll just say it's going against my PTO job, and go ahead and pick the WBS. I hit save, and now what's going to happen is an email is going to be going off to whoever my approver is to let them know that I just asked for time off. If they approve that time off request, automatically it goes onto my timesheet. So you can see I've got 8 hours on my timesheet. If they rejected it, they would need to type in a reason, and maybe they say, Paul, you don't have any PTO available, so you can't have Friday off. They can also see what my PTO balance is, and they can see details about planned future PTO calculations. So they're going to have visibility of that to make that PTO decision. A user, as I mentioned before, they only see the charge codes available to them, but they also have the ability to set favorites. So in the demo system, I've got, it looks like about 10 different charge codes, but these are the 2 that I charge to in every demo. So I have those pre-set up. So then every time I go into the system and I say, I need a new timesheet, and I pick the period, it's going to drop those particular charge codes in for me. And then I just go to the day that I worked. So let's just say that yesterday I put 8 hours on the Project Kempster task. And then if I needed to put a comment, I can go ahead and enter that in here. Click OK, save it. As a user, that's what I'm going to do on a daily basis. So very straightforward, easy. The system helps to, only show the things that should be available to them. It reduces their strain and stress. The system also has controls in place. So today, I guess, is Wednesday. So let's just say that I tried to enter time for tomorrow. I'm going to work on Acoustic Kitty tomorrow, and I'm going to go ahead and enter my hours today. And now when I hit the save button, it just says, there was an error here, and it tells me that on this task, future time's not allowed. So it's going to prevent you from making those kind of mistakes, that can get you into trouble from a timesheet audit perspective. The system also has change tracking. So if I changed a previously entered cell, the system would record that change. So if I tried to change, my time on Monday to 5 hours, now it's saying, what's the reason? And then I could say, forgot I worked 9 hours. Click OK, save it, whatever that reason is, and now my timesheet gets updated, and also that audit trail is built into the system. And then at the end of the timesheet cycle, I hit my submit button, and this is going to be the start of that workflow, for approval to, go ahead and let somebody know that my timesheet's submitted, and now it needs to get approved. And I think I didn't mention it, but you can have an unlimited number of approvers on a particular charge code. All right, on the expense side, this is the place the employees are going to go to enter their expense reports. The process they'd go through is they'd start off with a new expense report, and they would just determine what is the period I'm processing expenses for. So let's just say that I do expense reports every week. And last week I was on the road the whole time. So I'm just going to say that this is my expense report for Jan 15, let's say week of Jan 15, 2017. Click Save, and now it creates my expense header for me. And then from here, I'd go ahead and enter the lines. So if I was on travel and it's all based on per diem, I would just run through the per diem wizard. So maybe this last week I was in Alabama, and then I would choose not only the state but also the destination. You can type it, or you can use the drop-down box. Click Next, and now it shows me what was the period I was there. So let's just say I was there the whole time this week. And then I would choose the job that's going to go against. So we entered time to Project Kempster. That must have been one we were at last week. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our travel code. And then what is the lodging code? And these are codes defined by you. And then what's the meals code? We're just going to say it's based on per diem. Click Next, and now it's showing me my per diem grid. So I could uncheck breakfast if breakfast was included with lodging, or maybe I didn't use the lodging the last day, whatever it might be. Click Next, and now it's showing me what is my lodging ceiling? I'd enter my actual lodging, and then I'd put in what the tax was. If there was any unallowable amount, it would go into my unallowable bucket. Now I click Finish, and now it creates my expense report for me. And so you see all the details. If I had attachments, I could attach documents to it if needed. And then if I had individual lines, I could add individual lines. So for anything from maybe airfare or mileage, and the system will automatically, you just enter the miles, the system will calculate what that amount is. And then I would just go ahead and save it and then submit it as part of my approval process. So once I submit it, it would go through the approval process. Also, nothing you need to rekey, so it's all managed for you. So now we've entered that time and expenses, and now we want to process labor. So we process labor through the time journal. So this is the place where you would go to process your labor. And I'm going to touch on this at a high level to kind of keep things moving. And what we would do is we would just import the time into the journal. So it's already in the database, but we're going to move it into our labor distribution journal, calculate the labor distribution. If it's internal payroll, so if you did payroll in NAV, you would just post it. It would move it over to the payroll processing. If you use a payroll provider, you could leverage. We've got integration with ADP, Paychecks, payroll networks, and we're also in discussions now with Paycom. But we've done it with integration with payroll with probably 15 to 20 different payroll providers. So that's kind of how labor gets processed. Everything is also posted in real time. So as soon as I hit post, it would hit the job ledger, general ledger, and also resource ledger. So I've got two last things I'm going to cover, and then we've got a couple minutes for questions. So cost pools, this is the place where indirect rates are set up. So it's as simple or as complex as your business. It manages an unlimited number of pools, so there is no limitation there. And then for each pool, you tell it how does the rate get calculated. That's your pool cost and base calculation. What does the allocation work? So it tells the system, are rates calculated and going to projects? Is it at actual rates and provisional rates? And the system is going to track both your provisional rates and actual rates in the system. Those are part of those month-end processes. And the last thing that Damon mentioned when we kicked this off, as he talked about the invoicing. And the invoicing is going to be an automated process. And whether you're invoicing for projects or product, and the process you would go through is you would run the create invoice function. It creates what we call an invoice proposal, which is like a review process. You can send that invoice out for approval. And once it's approved, it becomes a posted document. And then these posted documents can be reprinted at any time, and also emailed. And we've got many different flavors. So whether you're printing things by labor category, so group it by labor category or the person's name, several different options in terms of how you display the data, including client-specific options. And then you can also print it on government forms. So whether it's the 1034, the 1035, the DD-250, those are all built into the system. All right, so we covered a lot, and we've got about 2 minutes left. So Damon, let's go ahead and let's cover a few questions. And I guess we've got 1 minute. So I'm going to pick two questions from the list that we'll cover real quickly. So the first question is around the size of company that uses this application. And that's a good one because I know we've got companies of different sizes. The application is used from companies that I would say are, probably 10 million to we've got clients that are over $1 billion in revenue. So it's really a wide range, but 10 million is kind of the starting point when people see the value in the automation. And then we've got clients that are over $1 billion. You can see kind of how the system scales. And then the last question I'll cover is, do you guys have experience in migrating companies off of Deltek GCS and Deltek CostPoint? And we do. We've done a significant amount of migrations from GCS, and lately we've been doing several migrations from CostPoint. And for folks that are on those systems, we're happy to talk to you to share our experiences and also get you in contact with clients that have gone through that process. So I know we put a lot into today's presentation from a content perspective. We're happy to follow up, answer the other questions individually we didn't get to, but we just want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to each of you soon.